How is America killing the Chinese internet? It is a cable station in Marseille, France. From the outside, it seems inconspicuous, but in fact it connects to an extensive data network, which accounts for 95% of the world's foreign internet traffic. As of 2021, the Marseille facility is connected to 16 main underwater cables serving such diverse regions as Hong Kong, Singapore, and India, Oman, Egypt, Greece, Great Britain, Portugal, Nigeria and South Africa. There are more than 1,400 landing sites worldwide, such as Marseille, to which about 500 existing and planned cables are connected. In total, the global network covers 1.4 million kilometers, approximately the diameter of the Sun. And although the network provides uninterrupted internet traffic around the world, a handful of companies from the United States dominate the supply, installation and maintenance of these cables: France, Japan and, more recently, China. Every single day, financial transactions worth more than $10 trillion are transmitted through these cables. Everything from Netflix programs to YouTube videos, top-secret diplomatic cables and military orders passes through this underwater network. Unsurprisingly, cable infrastructure is a geopolitical imperative. Now China and America are using all available instruments of government lending to restore control and establish parity of power in the 21st century. From military might to intelligence gathering, economic warfare, and domestic and international law, nothing goes unnoticed because ruthlessness is as good as strategy when looking for expedient results. In June 2017, Nick Warner, Australia's head of foreign intelligence, traveled to the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific. Australia has led the country since 2003 because it believed it was in trouble and needed help. Australian security personnel were responsible for the police and other important government agencies. Warner had been in charge of this before, and now he wanted to complete the last case. When he got there, he met with the leader of the Solomon Islands by Manasseh Sogavare. They talked about a new long cable, about 4,500 kilometers long, which will connect the capital of Honiara with Sydney in Australia. This cable was of great importance for the region, and at first many Western countries and organizations wanted to help with this. Even the Asian Development Bank has shown interest. But there was a problem. Sogavare chose the Chinese company Huahe Marine to implement the project, and this made Australia worried. The reason was that back in 2013, someone leaked classified information from the United States, and it showed that American equipment similar to what Huahe had could be used for espionage. Western spy agencies were afraid that China might do the same. Shortly after talking to Warner, Sogavare lost his job because of a vote that said he was doing bad things like corruption and taking bribes. In 2019, he returned to his job and wanted to be friends with China in terms of security. But before that happened, the man who took his place, Rick Hu, who used to work at the World Bank, said no to Huahe and let Australia take over. This event, which most people today don't really remember, was one of the first battles in the larger battle for the world's internet cables. These cables are very important because they keep the internet running all over the world, but they have a weak spot. Although they are really long, they are not very thick, about the width of a garden hose. They have different layers and parts. There is a layer of plastic on the outside to keep everything safe. There are strong steel wires underneath for protection. Then there is more plastic to keep out water, followed by more steel wires and plastic. There is a copper or aluminum tube in the middle to protect the cable. There is a special tape around all this to prevent water from entering. Finally, tiny, hair-like fibers are located right in the center which transmit information using laser signals. But when the signal travels a really long distance, it can weaken, so they have to use a device called a repeater every 60 seconds, 70 kilometers to amplify it. Some people think that these repeaters can be used for surveillance when they are being manufactured or repaired. Others say that spy agencies can monitor cables in places where they come ashore as a goldmine for espionage. Underwater cables are laid in the ocean using special vessels. There are about 50 such vessels in the world. So working with these cables is really a specialized job. Sometimes there are not enough specialists, so even countries that do not get along with each other may have to turn to each other for help to fix their cables. It doesn't matter if it's a big powerful country or a small one. They may still need help from someone they don't fully trust. When other people work with these cables, there is a risk that they may install devices to steal or distort the data passing through the cable, which would be a big problem. So, when a new cable is made, it's like a move in a big world game. This can either bring countries closer together for security purposes or make someone feel left out. This is how we send information around the world, and this is why these telegrams are so important. Compared to using satellites, which are much more expensive and cannot transmit as much data, cables are the best option. Despite the fact that satellite technology may become better in the future, since 2023, practically no data is transmitted via satellites over long distances, and this is unlikely to change in the near future. But there are concerns that these cables could be used for espionage or be deliberately tampered with. That's why some countries claim that only certain companies can lay these cables in their part of the ocean or take care of them. It used to be different. Governments used to pay for these cables. But in the 2000s, Chinese telecommunications companies like Huawei started visiting places where there was no good internet and helping them. Then Chinese telecommunications companies started doing their own thing in the cable business. By 2015, China had launched a project called the Digital Silk Road to expand its network. They teamed up with Huawei Marine and in just 4 years gained 15% of the entire global market for these cables. For the United States, it was like a wake-up call. It showed them that they need to pay more attention to these things. The Trump administration has become very tough on China. Underwater cables are a bit special because they mix public and private materials. This makes them important for national security and business. The U.S. wanted to control these cables and make sure that American companies were the leaders. Once these cables are in the water, the companies that operate them will be able to make money by allowing other technology companies and internet service providers to use them. This can last for a long time, for example, several decades. Cables going to developing countries can also help American tech giants enter new markets, and the government can use these cables to spy on what is happening. So, the government and business work together. The government paid large bills to make sure that American companies received contracts and not companies from other countries. Major technology companies such as Google, Meta, formerly Facebook and Microsoft, have also joined us, having invested a lot of money in cables since 2016, about $2 billion, which is 15% of all money spent on these cables worldwide. These companies also use most of the world's internet, so by owning cables, they gain even more control. Because of this, Chinese cable companies have not received many contracts. The United States threatened to punish them, so two companies, Global Marine and Huawei, sold their shares in the joint project to another company called Hangtong Group, which changed its name to MTech. But by that time, the damage had already been done. Currently, MTech has only 2 projects in Southeast Asia, and they will not be ready until 2024. So, the US has been able to prevent China from becoming a major player in the global cable business, at least for now. MTech controls only 10% of the known cables, which is much less than the French company ASN and the American company Subcom, which control 41% and 21% of the cables, respectively. But despite the fact that the US is good at planning cables, China is better at repairing them when they break. When there is a problem with the cable, it needs to be fixed quickly. So, whoever can get the job done quickly gets it. China takes care of the cables in the nearby seas, even those belonging to America and Japan. Some people think this might be a chance for espionage. In 2022, Chinese ships repaired cables belonging to AT&T, Verizon and Microsoft in the East China Sea. Then, in May, Microsoft said they were almost certain that hackers, possibly from China, had penetrated their telecommunications systems. China said they had nothing to do with it. Because of things like this, the US wants to keep new cables away from China. In 2020, they launched the so-called Clean Network Initiative, which essentially says that cables should not run directly from America to China. The results speak for themselves. The Bifrost and Etcha submarine cables, scheduled to open in 2024, are laid bypassing disputed waters near China. Like the Apricot cable, it is a 12,000 kilometers long project connecting to the Philippines and Indonesia, which are due to be completed in 2025 in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. However, the geopolitical factors are even more pronounced. In 2021, the World Bank abandoned the project of laying a cable connecting Guam with Micronesia, which was won by the Chinese company HMM Tech. Washington, in fact, disrupted the project. In 2020, the State Department contacted Micronesia expressing disapproval of China's involvement. After that, Washington, Tokyo and Canberra announced that they would finance the laying of a new cable along the same route. By June 2023, these $95 million, $250 billion was allocated. In turn, this raised the status of Guam, which is heavily militarized the overseas territory of the United States, as a large data center. The hostility between America and China is pushing companies to create new routes to transfer data traffic. Since national security and data security are priorities, policies and regulatory frameworks are being developed that completely exclude hostile vendors from the entire ICT ecosystem. Singapore, Indonesia, the Philippines and the U.S. island territory of Guam are currently becoming centers of international data traffic. But the competition extends to the Indian Ocean. Here, the main source of disagreement was the CME-WI6 cable, stretched from Singapore to Paris. Initially, the preference for its construction was given to the Chinese HMM Tech. The company's application has been the most competitive to date. At a price of $500 million, it was only a third of the asking price, and it was expected that the project would raise the international prestige of HMM Tech. However, Washington intervened again and made it clear that it would impose sanctions on the project. As expected, this led to trouble. The project was transferred to Subcom, a New Jersey-based firm with deep ties to U.S. intelligence. Subcom itself began its activities in 1955 as a Cold War-era project to strengthen American anti-submarine capabilities. She is currently developing cables for companies such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft and Meta Platforms. However, strategically, his most important role is as an exclusive contractor for the U.S. Armed Forces, which he helps control the PLA Navy. Subcom is also in an advantageous position to lay a new cable to Diego Garcia. The Anglo-American naval base of 3,000 people is located on an atoll that is under British control. Its central location allows Washington to project its power onto vital shipping lanes, connecting West Asian oil producers with East Asian oil importers. Currently, the island serves not only as a naval base but also as a link for the Five Eyes intelligence exchange network, which unites the intelligence services of the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. On the other hand, China's involvement in the Indian Ocean is not that great. They mostly invested in cables before they started having problems with their technology companies. One of the Chinese companies, China Mobile, helped create the Two Africa cable, which connects Africa to Europe. Another company, China Unicom, invested in the sale of 5,800 a kilometer-long cable connecting Brazil with Cameroon. This cable started working in 2020, but recently, not many Chinese cables have reached Western countries. One of the rare examples is the Cable of the World, which was launched in December 2022. This is an ultra-long cable, 12,000 kilometers, and it connects Singapore, Kenya and Pakistan with France. It passes through Egypt and Malta. Chinese companies have paid for and built it all, including Ntek. France agreed to the project because it wanted to be more independent when it comes to their internet projects, especially against a background of tensions between the United States and China. But over time, splitting cables into separate networks can make them more attractive targets during a war. Despite the fact that some countries, such as Ukraine, are trying to use satellite internet to avoid there are no problems with the cables, in fact it is not a very good replacement, at least for several decades. What makes the conflict over these cables even more terrifying is that it's really hard to tell if something bad is really happening to them intentionally or just by accident. And in places where there are many these cables, such as the South China Sea, are also a lot of boats and everything that happens underwater. Sometimes anchors and fishing nets create problems, as do natural phenomena such as landslides and earthquakes. All this can lead to misunderstandings and mistakes. For example, in early 2023 during the year, the internet went down on some islands controlled by Taipei, and within a week 2 main cables connecting the islands to Taiwan were cut. People thought China did it, but later they realized that there was no clear evidence that China was involved or intended to do it. Another problem with these telegrams is that the norms of international law are not very clear to them, and they do not meet modern requirements. The US and China tried to set their own rules, but they weren't very good. The most recent American law on these cables was passed back in 1888. If someone breaks the cable, they can be fined $5,000 and imprisoned for up to 2 years. If he messes up anchors or fishing nets, he can get as little as $500 in fines and 3 months in prison, which is not much. The penalty for repairing something that can cost up to $3 million to repair. Meanwhile, Chinese law is being applied inconsistently. Beijing imposes fines depending on the degree of interference. Intentional or negligent damage to the cable carries a $400 fine, but operators can also be ordered to stop working. Laying unauthorized cables also carries a $28,000 fine, but lax enforcement means that on average, 26 cable defects occur in China every year, more than in any other state. This has accelerated the recent tightening of sand mining, drilling, anchoring and bottom trolling measures. Suspicious vessels' documents on the rupture of military cables were also seized. China insists that the right to delimit cable routes through the continental shelves belongs to the coastal state. In practice, this means notification the State Oceanic Research Administration and receipt of a letter of disagreement from the PLA Navy, which sometimes leads to a change of route. Only after that, the operator can apply for permission to lay their cables in China. After that, they must fully inform the maritime authorities about their activities. However, such a position is likely to cause friction, especially given that Beijing claims that operators operating within the 9-point line, allegedly historically claiming almost the entire South China Sea, must obtain its consent. Both Beijing and Taipei declare China's sovereignty above the sea, despite the decision of the Permanent Court of Arbitration in 2016, which declared it illegal. Obtaining a permit to work with cables in the USA is a difficult process. Companies have to seek approval from various groups, such as the FCC, the Foreign Exchange Assessment Committee, participation in the United States, the Army Corps of Engineers, and sometimes even in state and local government agencies. Authorities. Dealing with all this paperwork can slow down the process by about 2 years. It may take even more time if a new law is passed restricting the sharing of cable technology in America. There is a saying that laws are like sausages, it is better not to see how they are made. By setting strict rules for obtaining permits, both China and the United States do not follow a large international rule called the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. China has agreed to follow this convention, and the United States regards it as customary international law. But the rules they set do not comply with the law of the sea. For example, Article 79 of the Law of the Sea clearly states that each country can lay cables along the ocean floor on the continental shelf. Article 112 goes even further and states that this applies to the high seas beyond the continental shelf. But maritime law also has some problems. It does not provide adequate protection for these cables. The convention does not say that attacking cables in the open ocean is against the law, and it does not place the responsibility on countries to protect cables in their own waters. If these problems are not fixed worldwide, every country you'll have to decide for yourself how to deal with them. This can lead to conflicts. These cables are like the world's information highways, and right now they are becoming an important part of the tension between China and the United States. The wires that will be laid today will determine how the world will work in the future. They will affect business, military strategy, and international laws. Right now the West is ahead, but China is becoming more powerful, and the countries are working together in various ways, groups such as BRICS. This could lead to new ways of working together on these cables. Whatever happens, the promotion and protection of cable projects is currently a geopolitical imperative because although control of all the resources that have long been a hot spot of war, the hotbed of conflict is currently the most valuable resource of all. Information. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to receive more weekly investment tips. Leave a comment below. Have a good investment.